Welcome to Simplifying SQL Server Migrations Using PowerShell. What if SQL Server migrations went more like this? You started with an empty databases, just the default logins, no linked servers or agents. Then you execute a single command where you specify the source, the destination, and the migration way. You get up, you grab a cup of coffee, you come back, and everything is migrated and complete. I've done this a ton of times, and I use PowerShell to do it. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about who I am. We'll discuss why SQL Server migrations are necessary and what things within SQL Server are usually migrated. We'll cover the considerations that have to be made when you're performing a SQL Server migration. We'll talk about how it's usually done, and then I'll show you some pretty awesome PowerShell demos to show you how it's done now. So who am I? As Mark had mentioned, I am a SQL DBA for GDIT at NATO Special Ops here in Belgium. I'm also a Microsoft PowerShell MVP, and I've been a DBA since 1999, and I've worked with PowerShell since 2005. I am on LinkedIn and on Twitter. I have a super elite Twitter handle. It's just @CL. I blog at netnerds.net, and I have a food recipe website at realcajunrecipes.com. And I am complimented. Mark thought that I had a Canadian accent. I actually have a Cajun accent. We are originally from Canada, and so it kind of makes sense. So why migrate? For me, the first thing that comes to mind are misconfigured SQL servers. I know that I have inherited environments where the SQL servers have all of the data files, the log files, and the backups go into a single disk. There's partially uninstalled instances on clusters. And so in those cases, it's important to go away from the misconfigured SQL servers and onto properly configured SQL servers that were created by a DBA. The next reason is consolidation. This is such a huge issue for the SQL Server community that there are talks that are dedicated solely to SQL Server consolidation. So I know a lot of us have experienced server sprawl. This is not only a huge administrative overhead, but it's also very expensive. And so this is another reason to go from multiple servers down to a more manageable amount. Next reason is a change in HA strategy. So organizations may decide on a new high availability strategy, such as going from a failover cluster instance to always on, or they may migrate from a clustered instance to a standalone instance and then just handle their HA outside of Windows and SQL Server. The next reason is resource requirements and best practices. So as an organization's data requirements grow, the SQL Server may outgrow the server on which it was built. And this has a bigger impact on things that should have been dedicated, but then they were, that they should have been dedicated, but they were initially installed on shared instances. And so things like Microsoft PowerShell, and Microsoft SharePoint and Microsoft System Center, they want a dedicated instance. And so in those cases, it's important to go away from that and onto a dedicated instance. Next reason are platform changes. So if you can upgrade your SQL Server and OS as an in-place upgrade, but that's not always ideal. So you would want to migrate for that reason. Or there's also hardware changes, or going from physical to virtual, or even out to the cloud. So what to migrate? Pretty much everything that you see in SQL Server Management Studio. Initially, I know a lot of us, when we're performing migrations, we look at we try to migrate the databases and logins and the jobs and schedules, but there's a lot of other things that we would have to migrate, such as the server configurations, everything that you see in SP configure, the linked servers, credentials. Then there's components outside of SQL Server, like reporting services and integration services, that should also be considered when you're performing a migration. So the considerations, there's a couple. With databases, I don't expect you to read this. My point here is that there's a lot to think about. I know when I first started with my own migrations, I was like, oh, I'll just use PowerShell and this is going to be so easy. But I didn't think about the complex structures. You know, if file streams are enabled on the source, they have to be enabled on the destination. When you're migrating, you have to think about addition differences and version compatibility settings, server collation, if you have mirroring, or even the database properties and attributes like trustworthy, read-only, etc. So there's a lot to think about here when you're performing a migration. Also with logins, as you may know, you can't just create a new login with the same username and password. You also have to migrate its SID. But in addition to that, you also have to migrate the server roles, the server permission sets, the credential mapping, password complexity and expiration, things like the default database and the default language all have to be considered when performing a migration. Then there's other things. So with the SQL agent objects, you have to migrate the related databases, logins, credentials. You have to think about if you want to disable it on the source or the destination. With link servers, you have to think about the OLEDB provider. You know, did you install a third-party OLEDB provider on the source, and does it have to be installed on the destination? Local files, if you'd have to copy them over, and then also the remote login passwords, which are super challenging to migrate. When migrating the server configs, everything that you see in SP configure, you have to think about the addition differences and the version differences. And then there's constrings. So which applications and logins are connecting from which hosts? So you have to reach out to your application analysts and let them know that the database has been migrated, so you have to know what's connecting and build up that inventory. With database migration methods, there are two basic methods. The first is a backup and restore, which is well suited for many situations. It's really solid, it's straightforward, but it's also labor intensive, even though it is scriptable. The next way is the detach, copy, and attach, and this is also solid, but it's even more labor intensive, and it drops some attributes that backup and restore don't. Because you have to copy over all of the white space, there's increased downtime with using this method. Next is the import and export data wizard. This is slow, it's messy. With SQL Server, it's error prone, it loses its attributes and logins. For me, I don't consider a database that's been migrated using the import and export data wizard to be the same database as it started out as. Next is log shipping. Log shipping is pretty awesome. It's ideal for really large databases. It's solid, but it's one of the more complex methods, and you really have to think about a lot of the addition and version combination issues when using log shipping. With mirroring, this is also another ideal path for migrating large databases, but it's complex and it's edition dependent, meaning that you can't go from a standard edition to an enterprise edition or vice versa. And the last way is the copy database wizard. So this is decent for small migrations, but it's prone to errors. It does drop some of the attributes, and the dependencies often error out. So let's take a look at copy database wizard detach and attach demo. In this case, I will be migrating 6 databases, and it's going to be sped up. So we start out, we specify our source, we select our databases, and then we paste the new path, we change the path, and then we change the path again. And then we change the path, and then we change the path. And this is very manual, totally prone. It's a lot of errors. Then you have to go and traverse the remote directory, copy and paste that in. Do the same for the logs, copy and paste that in. You probably make a mistake like I did during this demo. You go and it works, but there has to be a better way than this. Next up are login migration methods. So the first one is the SSIS transfer logins task. This is a super painful way. It changes the password, it disables the accounts, it doesn't transfer over any of the server roles or maintain any of the permission sets. Really the only thing that it does is maintain the SID. Thanks, but no thanks. The next way is a little bit better. There's SP Help Rev Login. I know when I first found this, I was really excited. It's a lot less painful because it does maintain the SID. It maintains the password. It doesn't disable the account on the destination, but it also doesn't transfer the server roles or the server permission sets. So it's still really manual and it doesn't scale well. And we'll take a look at migrating logins using SP help rev login. So this one is not going to be sped up because I want you to be tortured along with me. So you start out, you're like, oh, here's my source and my destination. Where did I put this script? I'll put it on GitHub. Let me copy that. It's a store procedure, so it has to be installed and executed. So I'm going to go to my source. I'm going to paste that. So execute it and installed it. Now we have to execute it. It's going to output some information there. You copy it. You paste it into the source. There's a couple errors. Sorry, to the destination. There's a couple errors, but it works. But whenever I was doing this, I was like, there has to be a better way than this to migrate logins. With migrating other stuff, on this list, the link servers and credentials really stand out to me because there's no way provided by Microsoft that includes the passwords for link servers or credentials. These passwords are stored deep in the registry. They're super encrypted. They're very hard to export, and prior to this tool set and a function provided by Antti Rantasari at NetSPI, I had never found anything that migrated the passwords for the remote logins. With finding the SQL Server keys, that's a lot easier, but you still have to dig through the registry. You may want to find your SQL Server keys to go from to change your edition to go from standard to enterprise. And then there's Central Management Server, which is one of my favorite things in SQL Server. It does have an import-export function, but it almost always errors out for me. So this is how a CMS import and export usually goes for me. So you go to your source and you export your XML file. Then you go to your destination, you import it, and then boom. So this happens because the source is in the destination, and you have to modify your XML file to get this to work, but I was thinking that there has to be a better way than this. And of course, PowerShell is that better way. So I built a PowerShell module called DBA Tools, and initially I started out with copy SQL login, copy SQL database, copy SQL Server agent, and copy SQL SP configure. And these went over the basics, and I was really excited about them because what I did was, in order to make sure that it worked in every environment that I would work in, I made sure that these commands worked for clusters, for standalone instances, for named instances, for SQL Server 2000 through 2016. This worked on every platform that I could think of, and I tested it all the way back to Windows XP. And so I went around and I did some presentations on this. I got really excited, and then I have built a whole bunch more. So with the DBA Tools module, you can migrate 26 components, but you can do it one by one. You can migrate a single database, you can migrate a single login or a single job, or you can use the wrapper, which is Start SQL Migration. What's really cool is I was presenting in Portugal, and Claudio Silva, he approached me later on and was like, hey, I'd really like to join the team, and he added this really cool thing called Test SQL Migration Constraint. And what that does is it goes through and it checks if you have a version difference or an edition difference, what is supported and what's not. So each of these, I know that this is a lot of commands, and I hope that it doesn't overwhelm you, but they are very well documented. I did my best. So if you go through these and you just want to look through it, remember get help. So if you do get help copy SQL login, then that'll show you the details about all the parameters and things like that. Sorry, my voice is dry. One second. So now I'm going to show you some demos, and you can still see that. Let me switch over to my demo machine. Alrighty. What do you see now, Mark?
I see your browser.
Okay, great, awesome. So at DBA Tools, I built a website around it. Originally, it started out on GitHub, but I figured that a lot of people are kind of worried about getting onto GitHub, so I made this far more approachable interface at DBATools.io. If you go through, there are videos. You can watch a SQL Server migration. And there's a whole bunch of posts and things like that. There's also a getting started guide that makes you, that I really wanted to get DBAs more comfortable with PowerShell. So it shows you, you can go to download. It covers the support that I talked about earlier, so it does go through Express, through Data Center. It works with Windows and SQL authentication and everything like that. And each of them, I really try to auto-populate each of the parameters. This is something that's super cool about PowerShell, where you can just specify databases. It'll go out to the source and grab the list of databases, and then you can just specify it that way. Next, I wanted to visualize the available commands. So I know a lot of people, when they see PowerShell initially, they're like, oh, what is all of this? But this is really, it's the stuff that we do all the time. That we copy, we sync, and each of these commands, they perform the copy. So you copy a database, or you copy a backup device, or a link server, a trigger. There's also this handy thing on the side. This is the featured commands. And down here at the bottom, there is a complete list of commands. So if we go and we look at them, right now we have 71 commands. Now, not all of these revolve around migration, but a majority do. We're really excited about this, and I'll go into it a little bit later. So if you're wondering, how do I get it? I've provided a number of ways to do it. So the first way is that you can install the module with PowerShell 5 with install module DBA tools. You can also just go to GitHub and copy and paste this. It'll download it for you, extract it, and everything like that. And then there's more manual ways down at the bottom. So we already looked at the commands and the team. I love working with everyone on the team. We have a lot of contributors. We have people who do PowerShell. We have people who work on Jenkins. We have a QA guy that is super amazing. If you would like to join, we would love to have you. And so now I am going to get to the migration. So the first thing, well, I've already installed it just to make sure that it worked. If you go here, you can see all of the commands that were imported with DBA Tools. Now, this comes with test Sequel Connection, and if you ever have any issues, if you can send me this information or give me information about your OS and your PowerShell version and your SQL version and things like that. So this is helpful when you're troubleshooting, either for me or for yourself. So if we run this, we can see it gives you the IP address and the port and things like that. So one of the things with DBA Tools, in addition to the migration that we'll soon be covering, it has other commands like get and set SQL max memory. So if we see here, you can go to a number of SQL servers, and it'll show you the total amount, the max amount, and then the recommended amount. And this recommendation is built off of a best practice by SQL Poolboy from Twitter. He created a formula. I took that formula and I codified it and made it super easy for you to go around, get all of your information, and then just set it. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to get the max. We're going to get the max memory settings where the SQL max memory exceeds the total amount on the server itself, and we're just going to pipe that to set SQL max memory. So now you can see the old max value is a couple terabytes, and now it's at the appropriate length. Super cool. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a login called Migrate Me, and then we're going to migrate it. And whenever I do this, I have to say it out loud. I have to uncheck that the user must change the password at the next login, or I won't be able to properly show you that it worked. So let's go to SQL cluster. Oh, I was also supposed to show you around the environment, my bad. So this is a SQL cluster that is, I believe, that's 2014, and we will be going to 2016. This has a bunch of databases, a lot of logins associated with that. It also has a credential, and it has an audit and some audit specs. backup devices, endpoints, has some linked servers, some triggers. These are all of the things that can be migrated very easily using PowerShell. So we also have a ton of jobs. I'm really excited to show you about one of these other commands. So here's the jobs, the alerts, the operators. These are all things that would be such a pain doing it one by one, but if you just use Start SQL Migration, you can copy it all over. The other thing that it can do is, let's see if I can see the registered servers. If you use registered servers, let's see. I don't know if I did this part. Let's see. I have a different lab that I'm working with now, and that is not populating. Oh, I typed in the wrong thing. My bad. So while SQL Server Management Studio crashes, I'll go back here. Okay, let me try one more time because I'm curious. Okay, there's nothing there. But it does migrate all of that stuff. So we are going to create the login and then uncheck that. New login, call that migrate me. We're going to copy this complex password, going to paste it here. Going to uncheck user must change password at next login. For the default database, we'll change that to tempDB. That's Rob Sewell suggested it. I like it. The default language is going to be Francais. Server roles, I'm just going to pick the first three so that it's easy for us to differentiate whenever we are looking at the migrated login. And then we have MSDB. We'll just pick the first three. The securables, it does copy over that, but they're not populated whenever you're initially making a login. And then it also brings this over, but I want to show you guys that it works, so I will not deny login or disable it. So now I've created the migrate me login. I'm going to come here, and we will execute copy SQL login. We'll specify the source as the SQL cluster and the destination as SQL 2016A. And then if you don't specify any logins, it'll just copy everything over. Or if you specify logins, it will auto-populate that, as we had spoke about earlier. So let's go ahead and copy that over. Super awesome. You can already see that it set the login language, went through all MSDB. So in 3 seconds, it migrated this single login. And we'll go to here, specify that, migrate me. And there we go. It logged in. It brought over everything with the permission sets and all of that. And now SSMS is not responding again for some strange reason. While that's crashing, we will perform a single database detach and attach, and I'm going to do this from the console so that you can see that it populates the databases. I'm assuming that's why I instructed myself to say that. And first, just to make sure, I'm going to import module, GitHub, because I don't have this in my module path. But whenever you perform the install, it does put this in your module path so that it just loads up every time. All right. Okay, so we will do this, and then so you can see with the source we specified SQL cluster, and with the destination specified that there we'll perform a detach and reattach, and then we will, why isn't that working? CK just said, as you can see, SSMS is very unstable. This is why we use PowerShell. It's just this version. I haven't really paid much attention to this particular VM, so I think it's the VM's fault. All right, so you can see this database is, thankfully, it populated, and then we will specify DB multi-file group. So I just hit tab, it auto-populated that, it auto-completed it, my bad. And what's really cool about this is that it is going through and it is copying over each of the files. This has a ton of files in it, and it's performing the copy. So imagine if we were doing this using any other type of method, we'd have to paste in that again and again and again, and PowerShell automatically determined all the files that needed to be brought over, and then it's copying it over. It's also a little slow because with detach and attach you are copying over the white space. Also this VM is kind of slow. But overall, I believe I tested it earlier. It takes about 2 minutes for the entire instance to migrate using backup and restore. So now we have it. Now it exists on the destination server, which is super cool. Okay, I also support what if. So with PowerShell, you can say, what if I did this? And you can get really detailed with the with what it reports there. So let me close this out. So we're just going to skip the link servers and the custom errors and the credentials because with Start SQL migration, you're like, well, Chrissy, what if I don't want to bring over my databases? You don't have to. You can just specify no databases or no logins. And this does bring over everything. So with Start SQL migration, it is intended to be an instance migration command. So it's saying this is what I would do. I'm testing this, I'm looking at this, I'm skipping this. Ooh, and something happened there that didn't happen earlier. Thanks, demo. Okay, so now I'm just going to clear this because nobody likes seeing red. All right, so now we're going to actually do it. We are going to make sure that NAS share migration exists, and it does. I'm going to come back here. Oh. Did I just switch screens? My apologies, it skipped. Okay, we're going to come here. Okay, and whenever you're performing a backup and restore migration, you have to specify a network share, or you can actually specify an admin share so long as the SQL Server service account has access to that share. So in this case, both of them do. So we are going to specify backup and restore and then the network share. And I saw that one error from before, so now I'm like, oh God. Here it copied over the SP configure. Now it's migrating custom errors and the credentials. Database mail, how nice is that? So it also copies over the user objects and system databases. So if you have like Ola Hallengren scripts and you store them in master or MSDB, it'll copy that over. This one copied the backup devices, and now we're getting into the backup and restore of the databases themselves. You can see here that it noticed that the database existed, so it just skipped that. If you want to, you can specify force, and it'll drop everything and migrate it. Well, not everything. If you have a login that exists on the destination that's not on the source, it will not drop that. So here you can see that it's setting broker enabled. If it has like the CLR assembly, it'll set the proper trustworthy. So it's bringing over all of these properties that usually we'd have to write down or make note of. And now we are copying over the logins. It's skipping the local machine names, so it's smart about that. With the data collector set, it noticed that it isn't supported on the destination, and so it didn't attempt to copy it. It also notices that, you know, if you have, we had talked about earlier with the dependencies, you know, with the SQL agent jobs, if you have to have the database or the login, if it doesn't exist on the destination, then it's just going to skip that. And we do have it planned to bring over all of the dependencies, but that's not something that's supported right now. What's really cool, too, is that this uses a transcript. And so you can just see, you can copy and paste the transcript file and see, you know, check it over for later exactly what and what didn't. So here we have, you know, it says that the data collector must be set up initially. That's one of the things that we couldn't do. Well, it's possible, but it's very challenging. So, but if you do set up your data collector, then it'll bring over all of the collection sets. This did check to see if the path existed on, if the audit path existed on the destination. So it is smart. It doesn't try to create it. But if you specify force and the path somewhat exists, if you have an M drive, then it'll go ahead and it'll create that path, and then it will migrate over all of the audits. And then it'll bring over, since it couldn't bring over the audit, it also skipped the audit specification. Brings over the endpoints, the policy management. So with policy management, it brought over the condition and what else is, oh, and the policy itself. It also did check to see. So the resource governor was skipped because the destination server is standard edition and resource governor is only supported in enterprise edition, so that is something that we check for. I love this. It brings over the extended events as well, and of course all of the jobs. If it exists in the destination, again, you can specify force. If it finds a match on the destination, then it'll drop it and then recreate it. So that is complete. I hope you're excited about this. This is something that I'm really excited about. So DBA Tools, and I know that this is simplifying SQL Server migrations, but it's so simple that I can move on to something else that's really cool. We have a lot of amazing commands for database administrators. This is one of my favorites. It was created by Rob Sewell, and it's remove SQL database safely. So I know whenever people come to me, they're like, Chrissy, I want to drop this database. I'm like, oh man, I have to make darn sure that I have a backup for this, but then what if the backup doesn't restore? So it's always very stressful. But with remove SQL database safely, check out what it does. It does this all automatically. It performs a check DB, it backs up the database with checksum, and then it restores it with verify only to the source. It creates an agent job so that you can easily restore that backup. So if they come in the next hour and they're like, oh no, I didn't mean that, then you can just right-click and execute a job, and boom, it puts it back. After that, it drops the database, and then it actually restores the database, and it performs a DBCC check DB. Once that passes, it drops it for a final time. How cool is that? So if we execute this, you can see that what it does is we can specify just one server and the backup folder, or we can have a destination. So if you want your agent job to be created on another server, then we can specify that as well. If you don't, then it will create the jobs on SQL Server that you specified as the source. So let's go ahead and run this. So this is, you can see that it's doing the check, the DBCC check DB, and all of that just happened in 7 seconds. So each of these steps just took 1 second, and if we go and we look here, you can see that I've tested this a couple times earlier today, but here is the final. And then if we go to, which one did I specify? I believe that was SQL 2016A. So if we go here, if we go here, and I hope that this doesn't crash again. Let me go ahead and do that. So you see this, we have the rationalized database restore script for SharePoint config. So if I wanted, we can go here, and I didn't even show you earlier that everything did come over. So this is the entire migration with all of the databases, the logins, etc. I got so excited about this when I forgot to do that. But if we go ahead, and we can see that SharePoint config doesn't exist anymore, but if we start this job, then it'll execute it, and then it's done. It already did its checks to make sure that it works. If we refresh, there it is. That is one of my favorite commands ever. So we have a lot in store as well. I wanted to invite you guys to our Slack channel. So this is say hi everyone. I don't know if anybody's listening. I hope they're not, because my voice is cracking. No, nobody is. All right. So we have 178 members, and we have a lot of really active developers that are in the channel, and we talk about DBA tools, and we make really great things. So, oh, nice. I didn't know. Thank you, CK. CK is always there for me. All right, so if we go to, this is something else that I'm going to show you, but it'll take a second. I just realized that I was on a different server, and you guys are just seeing something that's really boring. I apologize. But before I get off of this server, I do want to show you. So we have, I want to go over a couple of the other commands that are available. So we have expand SQL T-log responsibly, which if you have a lot of VLFs, then that can really impact performance. This will expand out your T-log in a responsible way. We have other commands like find SQL duplicate index, we already went over, remove SQL database safely. We have the set SQL temp DB configuration, so this is a best practice that Mike Fowl implemented. He did all of the thinking for us, so he put this, he codified this best practice into a script, and you can just set that and it'll do everything for you, which is really nice. There's other ones that just make your life easier that aren't necessarily best practices, like show show SQL who is active. So that uses Atom Mechanics script, and it outputs it to an out grid view. And the really cool thing about a grid view is that unlike SSMS, you can filter, you can search, you can reorganize everything. It's really, really nice. Orphaned users. Now, you won't experience as many orphan users, I hope, because you're using Copy SQL Login, but whenever you do, you can either remove your orphan users or you can repair them. So that's something that Claudio Silva did. That's really cool. You can get the disk space on each of the servers, so if you run a lot of reports, you can just go out, and that makes it super easy. You can also get the server file system, and this is if you want to implement using the file system in some of your own commands, and then also the database list, so it makes it easier to interact with PowerShell. The next thing that I want to do is quickly introduce you. I wanted to see, does anybody, or do we have any questions? I don't see any at this time. Okay.
We've only got one question from Joe, and he talks about the .NET 4.5 framework. So he says, can we use a 4.5 framework with this module?
I believe so. I try to make it support as old versions as possible, and it also supports newer versions. I run bleeding edge PowerShell environments, and so the answer is yes. You can go all the way back to XP, or you can go all the way forward to the unreleased TPVs, or sorry, the previews of SQL. Of Windows Server, and it works on that as well. So that is our intention, and if you ever come across anything that doesn't work, let us know, because it's something that we overlooked and forgot to test.
Cool. One thing I'll also ask while you're talking about it is, how easy would it be for someone to get involved with as a contributor for DBA Tools? What would they need to do?
Okay, so what I thought that I was showing you guys earlier, I'm switching to my other server. So this is the SQL Community Slack. That's at sqlcommunity.slack.com. If you join our channel, it's DBA Tools. We have 178 people right now, 61 are active, and this is where we collaborate. We talk about the design of things. We get into disagreements. We get into awesome agreements. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy this channel. So if you have access to GitHub, we do everything through Git, and what's very cool about that is we have a development branch, so you just submit your stuff there. We do a bunch of testing, and then we put it in the master repository. So that's how you can either do that, or you can email me at clemaire@gmail.com. It's super easy to contribute. It is. We're very welcoming. If you don't know PowerShell all that much, what you can do is you can take this as a learning opportunity, so you can start to build out your command, submit it to us, and we do code reviews and help out that way. And Dan said, if I managed it, you can too. But it's true. We do have all skill levels, and there's different things. So a lot of beginners, they may want to suggest new features that they need, or they can. More advanced people can do a lot of QA. If you have a large lab, then you can do a whole bunch of QA. So that is something that I really strongly encourage, and we do have a lot of really great people on the team that are super eager to help. And I did want to introduce one more thing. So Rob Sewell, he is one of my close friends, and we are working on this automated reports for DBAs. It's a sister project of DBA Tools, and it's super cool. He had this thing that just completely blew my mind, and the video is going to be online soon. But he was typing, you know, how many servers, and then it's like 145, and then he's like, are in London, and then it's like 35, and so he has all of this stuff, and then he has the reports. And what we're doing is, right now that's available online at GitHub in his repository, a DBA database. But what we've done is we have taken that and with the manual install and made it an automated install, and I've just tested this. We're going to try it. If you guys can see, I hope that the screen is big enough. So after you've done your migrations and you're like, oh man, my estate is awesome, I want to keep an eye on it. So you can install DBA reports, and what this does is it installs a client JSON file that just keeps everything so you don't have to type it in every time. It also notices that, hey, you didn't specify a proxy account. Does your SQL Server agent service account /SQL Server have access? If it doesn't, it prompts you to create the proxy, or you could just say no, and then I think it gets mad. Fine. Oh, no, that one's all right. It copies over everything. If you don't specify an install directory, then it will just pick one for you. And what we did was we thought that your backups directory is probably a pretty safe place for all of your scripts to go. And then it goes in and it creates your database if your database doesn't exist. And then it creates all of the tables. The way that we do it to make it as fast as possible, because I love speed, we use TVPs to do the inserts. Thank you, Claudio. And then we create the jobs for you, and we have these jobs that run PowerShell scripts, and then we schedule them for you. So we really want to simplify your installation of this DBA reports. And you might be going there now. It's not available yet, but we do plan to have it available hopefully within the next 2 weeks. So here we go. You can see that it scheduled it, and then it wrote out the config file. If you do use a credential to log into your SQL Server, it does write out the password, and it's secure, so you don't have to worry about that. We were concerned about fast running and safe running scripts, and so that was considered for you guys. And then we also wanted to make it really easy. So to add to the inventory, all you have to do is copy paste and say like SQL 2016. This may not be in a working state because it is something that we're working on. Yeah, it doesn't work right now, but it will be as easy as that. And then for the reports, all you'd have to do is create an alias, and then you can just use our reports that we are going to provide, and because it's using the same alias, then your stuff, you just do a refresh, it'll remove our data, it'll put yours in, and then your reports are going to work. So that's something I know that this is kind of an aside, but it's something that we're really excited about, and it does tie in with DBA tools and migrations. There is one more thing that I wanted to show you guys. So we are back on Workstation. I love this. This is really fun. It's a bonus video. Oh, that went all the way to the beginning, and I'm not sure. Let's see how we get out of that. I'm going to hit Shift F5. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to give up on it. Okay, never mind. No, I feel like you guys deserve it. Let's see if I could just do it from here. No, then what I'm going to do is press play and then just go through it. Oh man, this was a bad idea. Good thing I have 12 more minutes. Okay, so here we go. Fun without grid. In this video, I am going to pipe a couple commands that are included in Microsoft's SQL Server module, now called SQL Server instead of SQL PS. It'll pipe it out to a grid. You can just select the databases that you need instead of selecting it from a drop-down or tabbing through, and then it'll migrate those two. So here we see that we have these databases, and they don't exist on the destination. What we'll say is get SQL database, we'll specify the instance, and then we'll pipe it to out grid view, and then we'll send that information to copy SQL database. So we selected those two, we go and we refresh, and boom, it's there. So that's really fun. I love PowerShell. I hope that you do too. And to review, so PowerShell is, it loves SQL Server. I love SQL Server. They work together super well, and they're very fast. It also simplifies, when you use PowerShell, whenever it codifies all the best practices or all of the checklists. As DBAs, we have so many things to check and so many considerations, but we have already done that work for you. And so it simplifies the process and it prevents human error because it does every single time. There's not a step that it's going to accidentally skip like we do as humans. So there's no more checklists. It's not boring anymore. Like for me now, migrating SQL Server is a ton of fun. So be a hero and impress your friends and find it at DBATools.io. Any questions? Do you want to come hang out with us?
Okay,
Can you all hear me?
That was awesome. Thank you very much for that, Chrissy. Yeah, we do have a few questions. So we've got one from Greg, who professes to be a Slack virgin, and he's saying he's extremely new to it and he doesn't really understand how he would subscribe to the channel.
I am terrible. I actually just gave the Slack address. With Slack, it's kind of weird. They expected it to be mostly used in corporations, where you can have somebody auto-invite you, but for communities, it doesn't work so well. So my apologies, Greg, I think it was. So if you go to sequelps.io/Slack or DBA Tools, DBATools.io/Slack, that'll load up. And what we have is an auto-inviter. And I am very serious on the auto-inviter. It says, I will check my email immediately and accept the invite. If our invite to acceptance ratio gets too low, then Slack kind of cuts us off until I get in touch with them. So you would just put your email here and click that button. You're going to get an email. It'll come from me, and then it will create your account. And then you can either log in through, this might work and it might not. If you go to sequelcommunity.slack.com, yeah, so you can log in this way. Or, so with the SQL Server Community Slack, by the way, everybody talks about a lot of stuff. So here we have Close This Fix. This is super cool. Close This Fix is a bot that I wrote for Twitter that keeps track of all of the SQL Server Connect items that have been closed as fixed or resolved. And so we can just sit in this channel and watch it happen, or you can subscribe to it. We also talk about DBA reports and DBA tools. There's also the POSH VCQA, and Mark is also welcome to come here and set up the hybrid QA if he would like. There's PowerShell, Health, SSRS. These are just the ones that I joined, so if you like Power BI, you can do that as well. So this is one of my favorite things ever. You can use either the web page, it's really responsive and nice, or you can use hey guys, or you can use the desktop version, and it works on iPads and all the iPhones and stuff like that too, so it's super cool.
Excellent. We've got a comment from John who states...
And Windows Phone, sorry.
So he states, did you just see today that Microsoft released PowerShell to OS X and Linux? I
did, and I'm super excited, and it's amazing. So we have Visual Studio Code and PowerShell on it, and I was so busy doing some of the DBA releases, the DBA Tools releases, that I haven't had I'm a terrible PowerShell MVP. I haven't had a chance to install it, but I am really excited. Linux and OS X are two of my favorite things, and so it'll be really amazing to see that. We were all watching Jeffrey Snover's video whenever we started doing our webcast. So after I am finished with this webcast, I will go back and finish watching that. I heard that there's some mind-blowing things in the video.
So comment
mind-blowing.
A comment from me here. So I don't know if you noticed, but with the latest update to Windows, we now have the Windows subsystem for Linux. So my question for you is, are we going to have any Bash migration tools?
Actually, that is something that I'm looking into, and it's something that I've considered. I believe that the answer is going to be yes.
Cool.
SMO is going to have to be on Linux, and if that happens, then that is absolutely something that I'm going to support. For me, as a fan of Linux, it is at the top of my list, so you'll see DBA Tools support that before it does Azure. I don't even know how that works, really.
Awesome. A few more questions. So your commandlets, do they actually implement error handling? And if so, how would you trap the errors that they may or may not generate in the script's logic?
So what we have is it writes it out yes, it absolutely does. And a lot of times what it'll do, it really depending on which command, some of them are stop errors where it'll write it out to the file and not necessarily to the screen. And it'll say, I just wrote this exception to this file. And a lot of times it'll continue on, however, and then you can go and check out in the exceptions file exactly what's going on, or you can copy and paste that and send it to me. But I do want as much logging as possible. I want, we support what if as much as possible. There's a lot of verbose stuff. If you hit dash verbose, you're going to see a lot in the background. So there's a lot of work that's put into each of the commands, and error handling is absolutely in the list.
Cool. Your QA cycles, do you QA your commandlets at every service pack release, or does it happen more frequently?
So Dan, SQL DBA is our, you'll find him in the DBA Tools Slack channel. He is incredible, and currently what we do, because this is all new for me too, I used to use GitHub like really poorly, and I'd commit like straight to master, but now what we've done is we branch out. People either fork the DBA Tools repository to their own repository, and then they create branches and they submit pull requests. But what we do is we go first to development. Dan does a whole bunch of testing, and it's always terrifying. He's like, I have a question, and I'm like, oh God, I know it's like 4 more hours of coding. But he's really great about that. I would rather him find it, than somebody out in the wild being like, it didn't work. And so right now we just we're doing monthly releases. Sometimes we'll do it faster, especially if there's an error that, I don't like the way that looks, and I'd like people to not be downloading that version. But we do want to get it to where, we have very, very regulated releases. We're just working towards that.
Awesome. That leads us quite nicely onto the last, or one of the last questions. Would this technique of migration be something that I should feel comfortable about using in production migrations, and presumably nothing is deleted at source?
Absolutely, yes. That is something that is very important to me, is the safety. I have used this in production. I always encourage, of course, run this in first. But for me, I do run my scripts in production, and I'm very, very hesitant. That's why it won't overwrite your databases on the destination. You have to specify force to do anything that might be considered destructive. But what's really cool, like whenever I do my presentations, I know that I don't have to mess with my source server, because the only thing this does with the source server is to copy stuff. Your destination is the only one that it writes to, and it does so carefully.
Okay, cool. And probably what's going to be the final question is from Stephen. He says, why use Bash on Windows instead of PowerShell? Is there a use case for it?
So why use Bash on Windows? Oh, well, whenever I would write the PowerShell stuff, if that's what you're referring to, I would not use it on Bash for Windows. I would write my PowerShell stuff for actual Linux installs. I wouldn't suggest, I'm going to try it to see if it works, but I wouldn't suggest that. If you're on Windows, then just use the Windows PowerShell commands.
Sure. So essentially, if you do it on Windows, it's just a convenience thing that you're intending to then port that to Linux.
Yeah, it would be fun, but no. Whenever we do support Linux, it'll be for actual Linux installs, not for the Windows and the Bash on Windows stuff.
Excellent. Okay, fantastic. Well, that was the last question. I've learned quite a lot today, and I think I'll be trying out your tools, Chrissy, very soon, and hopefully joining your Slack channel. So you should see me on there quite soon.
Awesome. We would love that.
So thank you very much for joining us. I think everyone's really enjoyed your presentation too.
Thank you guys so much.